just remind everyone to mute if you can, just for the first little bit, unless you're speaking, of course. Good evening and welcome. This is a meeting of the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Halton District School Board for Wednesday, February 18th, 2026. We'll get started this evening with a roll call to record who is in attendance, and I'll pass the mic over to our Vice Chair. Good evening, Katie.
Good evening. All right, we have Sapna Gaba from Association for Bright Children.
Hi, yes, I'm right here.
Wonderful, thank you. Amanda Winch from Autism Ontario. Jennifer Laguerre from Autism Ontario.
Present.
Yelena King from Centre for Diverse Learners.
I'm here, good evening.
Sierra Kernick from Community Living Burlington. Shania Jagnandan, Community Living Oakville.
Hello.
Is it Shania? Am I saying it?
Yeah, like Shania.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful,
Okay.
thanks. Melissa Dockeray, Easter Seals. Sophia Siddiqui, Halton Down Syndrome Association.
So frustrating.
Erin Sproul for Voice.
Oh, couldn't get to the mute button fast enough. I am here, and I saw that Melissa did join. She was joined just as you were calling her name.
Oh, hi, Melissa. Kaisa Klassen, member at large.
Present.
Katie Schleifer, member at large, present. Tara Connolly sends her regrets. Trustee, I'm so sorry, Wubenhorst.
Hi.
Hello. Did I say it correctly or no?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. That'll do. Perfect. Trustee Baxter.
Good evening.
Trustee Zhang sends his regrets. Trustee Oliver. Superintendent Ruddock.
Good evening.
Principal Spruan.
Good evening, everyone.
And Vice Principal Sauvé. Is it Sauvé?
It is. Hi, everyone.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. And we have Summer Sweetman from Communications. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We will move on now to begin our meeting formally this evening by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land upon which the HDSB is situated is on the ancestral treaty and tidal lands of the Anishinaabeg, Ojibwe, Michizagi Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Michizagi territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treaty obligations, duties, and responsibilities in Indigenous rights, while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land. Next on our agenda is approval of the agenda itself. Could I ask for someone to move a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I will.
Great, thank you so much. Is there someone who could second that motion, please? Just raise your, oh, thank you so much, Audrey. Are there any modifications or amendments that need to be made to the agenda or any opposition to the agenda as it now stands? None being seen, our agenda is approved unanimously. Next, we'll move on to approval of the last meeting, which is the January 21, 2026 meeting minutes. Would anyone like to move a motion to approve the minutes? Great, thank you so much, Sapna. Is anyone able to second this motion?
Aaron will.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Has anyone noticed any errors or omissions, or is there any opposition to the minutes as recorded? If so, please raise your hand to indicate that now. No, looks good. Okay, none being seen, the January 21 meeting minutes are approved unanimously. We don't have any action items this evening, so we'll move right into our SEAC discussion and question period. And we're starting off this evening with a presentation from staff, IEPs, modified curriculum, and learning outcomes. So I'll just pass it over to Colette to introduce staff and get us started. Thank you.
Excuse me, thank you. And I'm just going to hand it right over to Conan, who's going to walk us through this presentation. Thanks, Conan.
Thanks a lot, Carol. Thanks a lot, Colette. I think I know pretty much everyone on this call, but for those who don't know me, I'm Conan Spruan. I'm the Principal of Special Education Services for the Halton District School Board. And I'm going to give a brief presentation today around IEPs, modifications, and learning outcomes. The reason this presentation became about is we decided as a department, we really wanted to focus this year and really examine modifications and really come up using the ministry guidelines and expectations, a sort of guideline and package and chart for staff and for administrators to ensure that we're using modifications consistently across the system. And there's a lot of misconceptions about modifications, not only the definition of modifications, but also the use of modifications. So we've begun work as a staff in terms of addressing modifications and how we're using modifications within our system. This presentation is just a very brief overview. It will not go in depth too much into modifications because we've really just started to unpack a lot of this work recently. This is a presentation that was given this week to HDSB administrators. It's not the full presentation, but I've just given some relevant slides and information here for SEAC. I'm just going to go through briefly what was shared with some of the administrators in terms of modifications. And then at the end of this, I will share with you what is called a modifications chart. And the reason we're bringing this forward tonight is we do want to share this with SEAC and be able to share this with you after this meeting and garner feedback for this modification chart. It is still in a draft form, as again, it's just been shared with administrators just this week, but we are going to start rolling that out further with staff later this week and into the fall. But first, what I'll do is I'll just sort of go through an overview of modifications, some of the definitions of what a modification is that you might see on an IEP. I'll briefly show a little bit of data that we've been starting to unpack, and then I'll share the modification guide sort of at the end, which you'll be able to see. So I just thought I'd start with that basically our North Star is always the multi-year strategic plan. So within the multi-year strategic plan, you can see that there are 6 areas of focus within there. And we really feel that IEPs and modifications fall under all 6 of those. A lot of times it is linked directly to learning engagement and achievement, but there's also a very strong link to modifications in areas of human rights, equity, and inclusion, mental health and well-being. Kindness, connection, and community, et cetera. So we really feel that this is important work to do to clarify modification and modification use, because it really is something that falls under all areas of the multi-year strategic plan. The guiding principles for special education. So from our special education plan, right at the very beginning, sort of on page 13, it's under the second standard of that. We believe at the Halton District School Board, and we're committed to the principle that learning is a developmental process, and children process and proceed through stages of development at varying rates. A little story I told at the principals meeting was many years ago, I was a grade 1 teacher for a number of years. And it was a total joy. I taught almost every grade in elementary, but grade 1 was a true joy for me in terms of teaching and learning with that. And one of the reasons was I had told the group that I took a number of courses in university for psychology and also independently some courses in psychology. And I really found it interesting how students learn, how human beings learn, the science behind reading, and how we decode and encode information. And I really found it interesting, even when I was in my 20s, starting in education, looking at things like phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, that connection of how kids learn. And one of the biggest joys I've had as an educator is when I taught grade 1 and that light bulb moment would go off. And I'm sure, some of you have experienced that where, a child can't read and then all of a sudden they put, k to at, cat, and then they can, be able to link those words together, and then you can have even things like a word explosion. And I'm also very passionate about this as a parent. I have a son who is 17 years old, and when he was in grade 2, at the end of grade 2, he still couldn't read. He barely knew his letters, barely knew his letter sounds. And he was very slow to reading, and it was a huge struggle for him where he really, truly couldn't read until well into his junior years. So it is something that I was passionate about as an educator, but I'm also passionate about as a parent too. And I recognized as a teacher and as a parent, all kids learn at different varying rates. And I do believe that it is fundamentally and ethically our jobs as educators to recognize that students develop at different rates and to accommodate for that and modify for that and put interventions in place where we can help those students. Because my son, when he couldn't read in grade 1, it certainly wouldn't be appropriate to give him a novel and expect him to do anything with that. I was very fortunate. I had some great teachers and great staff who were great at putting in some of those environmental structures and accommodations and various learning tools in for him to really help him read and help him build his confidence when he was one of the only kids who couldn't read. So that's sort of our guiding principle in looking at that. Let's go to the next slide. So what is a modification? This is taken directly from the Ministry of Education under their policy guide. And basically modifications are changes to grade level expectations for a subject or course. So that can be changes involving the the knowledge and skills required, where they actually a lot of times typically go down, but sometimes we go up, but typically change to a different grade. So we look at the skills and knowledge, and we are changing the expectations and looking at a different grade level. So that can look at where, a child may be, in grade 6, and we're looking at modifying to a grade 5 or a grade 4 level. Another way that we do modifications too is we look at the complexity of the current grade level and what the current curriculum is. And sometimes we either increase or decrease the number and complexity of the regular grade curriculum expectations. So there's sort of two different ways to look at that. And one of the things we want to start having our administrators do and lead this work down through our certs and through our teachers is, when do we modify and when don't we modify? And when do we modify the complexity at the grade level? And when do we look at going at a different grade level? So that's some of the work that we are starting to look at and starting to unpack right now. Here's just another quick definition sort of that adds to the modification. And this comes from another ministry doc called Growing Success. So we're always looking for opportunities for students to achieve success. And one of the ways that we look at that, which you can see bolded there, is working within their zones of proximal development. And that's, like it says there, it's crucial for fostering engagement and progress. So as leaders, when we see modifications on an IEP, we really have to think through, are the modifications, are the interventions that we're doing, are they working within the proximal development of that child? And does it align, and is it a fair assessment and evaluation of the learning that they have to do? So it's finding that sweet spot where, the work isn't too hard, where they become overwhelmed and it starts to hurt the self-esteem. But we don't want to lower expectations so much that the child's not being challenged. So it's really trying to work at all those levels of intervention that we're doing in terms of when we're using modifications and when we're not. But again, I'll get into this in a little bit more. So the impacts of modifications, we view, and this is some of the messaging that we're rolling out, is that we really view modifications as a last resort. And this really links to the Human Rights Commission. And this also links to the Right to Read report, where before we go to modify, in particular when we're modifying down a grade, we really want to look at everything that we can exhaust first before we modify for a child. So we want to look at intensive modifications, which could be the first response. We want to look at all types of levels of intervention and work that we can do before we look at modifying down a grade, or even modifying the complexity of that grade. Because we think it's really important that we want the students to be able to achieve the level of success they can. And we want to exhaust everything first before we're looking at something like a modification. School board modifications. So I thought I would just pull up some data here. So this data is from October 1st, 2025. So it's a few months old. Now there's going to be some changes in these numbers of IEPs, and there's going to be a few extra or a few more IEPs or a few less IEPs. So these numbers aren't exactly active, but we were able to pull data from the system from just 1 to 8. So we don't have secondary data here, and we don't have kindergarten data, but we just pulled active IEPs for grade 1 to 8. This does not include information where students have alternative curriculum expectations. So if they had alternative curriculum expectations, we didn't include them in this data. It's basically just data where we've seen language and math that is either accommodated or modified. So as you can see here, I'll just pull the data out quickly. 26% of our IEPs from grade 1 to grade 8 include modifications. So of those 26, we've got 24% are in language, 20% are in mathematics, and 19% are in language and mathematics. So, if you have a look at those numbers there, those numbers, are reflective that we do use modifications quite widely across our system. And there's something that are implemented in many of our schools across the system. And that's why we felt that it was pertinent that we look at modifications and make sure we have a clear understanding of modifications and how we're using them. This data here I also pulled up. We have data here where it's K-1 again, and it's students with language modifications and students with math modifications. What this means is if a student is modified in language, this is showing basically the counts and where we see on their report card data with their modifications, the level that they're achieving, whether it's level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4. The one piece of this data, which we are still trying to figure out how to get this data, and I thought I would mention this, is that when you look at this language modification, that data where they achieve includes modifications where they're modified at grade level, but the complexity is reduced, but it also includes modifications where the grade level is reduced. So if they're in grade 6, maybe they're doing grade 5 or grade 2 or grade 1. So we haven't been able to tease that data out. We're still working with our research department and the IT to kind of tease that data out. We haven't been able to figure out a way to sort of pull that data through. But as you can see there, it kind of gives an example of when a student is on modifications, this is sort of the level that they're achieving. And it can't be automatically assumed that if a child is on modifications, that they're automatically going to get a level 3 or a level 4. A lot of times we have modifications in, we're assessing them under the modifications. And then we're determining after they've been modified what that assessment mark would be. And then we can start to adapt and change those modifications based upon the level that they're at. And I can stop here just for a couple of questions. I think Katie had her hand first.
Yeah, can you just explain, please, the levels? Like, is that the degree to which it's modified? Like, is for the okay, can you explain that, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking teacher talk here. My apologies. So you're basically looking at almost like a grade level. So if I was to give it like a letter grade, it's almost like level A, B, C, and D, if that kind of makes sense. So if they're modified, say the grade 6 modified, that would say, as an example, they're achieving a level 2, would be sort of like a C. Do you know what I mean? Level 3 would be like a B. So the one piece that there's sort of a misconception sometimes around modifications that they're modified down so they get a certain grade. And that's not typically necessarily the case. It's looking at modifications in terms of, we're modifying, doing the assessment, what is sort of the level they're achieving, and then adjusting the modifications based upon that. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think someone else has their hand up. Sorry, I can't see the name.
Yeah, hi, Kanan. This is Sapna.
Okay.
This is actually very interesting. What I would love to understand is, I'm assuming this is where the kids hit the level after they received IEP. Do we know where they were in these levels before they were put on IEP, just to help us understand what was the growth that came with it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, which I actually don't have the data for, and I'm actually currently writing that down. Can I ask a follow-up question? Are you asking is the question you're asking is what prompted the modification, or what was the grade before they got the modification? Is that what you're asking?
I think it's a combination of both. What prompted the modification? Was it because they were way below where they should have been, or they were identified that they need the help? And when they were identified, what grade level were they at, and how did IEP help them get better on those grade levels?
Yeah, good question. So to answer your question, it's basically all of those, and it's different for every kid. So there are certainly examples, and I can say this as a principal because I wasn't in school principal, and I will be again one day. The modification sometimes, because absolutely the stated thing is the student is really, really struggling. So you can have, say, a grade 4 student who is struggling. They're doing different levels of modifications. They've even tried to accommodate, and they are still really struggling. And the school, through their school resource team, has made the decision that we may want to reduce the complexity of that, or even go down a grade level. But a lot of times it's that collection of that assessment data that really determines whether or not they're going to do the modification. We do modify beyond grade level, so above grade level, although it's very uncommon that we do that. It's typically modification, reducing the complexity or reducing the grade level. But a lot of times if a student is struggling, we do that. It's certainly a lot of our modifications can be linked to if a student has an exceptionality, but certainly not always. Just because a student has an exceptionality does not mean that they're modified or that they would automatically be modified, because it again goes back to a zone of proximity where they, we're meeting them where they're at. So certainly when we get an assessment, if there's a psych ed assessment or a student has an exceptionality, a lot of times that assessment helps us inform us whether we do modifications or not, but it's not always the be all and end all as to whether or not we do an assessment. A lot of times we collect other data to determine if there would be a modification. I certainly know, like as an example, I was speaking to my neighbor whose son has a learning disability, and he's been gone through IPRC and has been identified with an exceptionality of an LD, but he does not have modifications on his report card, nor would it be appropriate to put modifications on his report card based upon the level he's able to achieve with his IEP with accommodations, if that kind of makes sense. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, to an extent. I think the intent was in general to understand, on an average, if a kid was, let's say, a level 1 before IEP modifications, were those cohort of kids being able to bring up to level 2 or level 3 as they were put on IEP with modifications or not. I think the interest is to understand how we were helping with the growth of those kids in their learning abilities with IEP.
Okay. I think Colette has her hand up.
Yeah, Sapna, I think you asked a really good question, and I know Conan's noted it down for us to work with research to further explore this. And this is really why we want to get into this work, is really to understand what is the tipping point, or what should be the tipping point when we enter into modifications as a general practice, knowing that we, of course, always take each individual student and each individual circumstance kind of independently. But, for some, achieving a level 1 at grade level would be acceptable and better than modifying below grade level. But in another situation, we might say, and the family might say, it's really impacting my child's well-being to get a level 1 report card after report card. And so we want to modify down so that we can teach them where they're at and build on some success and some well-being. So it really, we don't know what the answer is. What's the right mark? What level of challenge or success should they be achieving that we're okay with to say, let's stay there at grade level, or let's modify at or below grade level. But this is why we're entering this work, is because that's a really important question for us to really explore and understand.
No, that's very helpful, and I really appreciate the work that is being done. I think it's important to know, to your point, Colette, what's the tipping point, and that can help us address the learning needs for each student.
Okay, what I'm going to share with you right now, but I'm going to try and make it a little bit bigger here, stay with me, is unfortunately we won't really have time to really unpack this here today. Can everyone, I hope we can see that okay now. So I'm just going back to double screen here. What we've been working on, again, this is still in a draft form, and we've just started sharing it with administrators, and we're slowly getting feedback from our schools, is we're coming up with schools with a modification chart. And we are going to be sharing this with CX, so Laura will share this out, and we will be sending sort of a form out where we'd like to get some feedback and some input from you before we begin to finalize this. But this really is a modification chart where it's, and I won't go through the whole thing, but it basically goes, it's almost like a stoplight, red light, yellow light, green light, which you can see here, but I'll kind of explain it. So it starts basically with responding to student needs. So it says there, as we engage in conversations to support learning, consider how we center student strengths and high expectations within our principles. So a lot of times this is beginning with where we notice the student is struggling in some area of the curriculum or of their understanding in class. So we start the conversation with some prompting questions for the school to look at in responding to that need. So you can see, for example, there, the whole person. Has cultural responsive pedagogy practices been put in place? Are we maintaining high expectations for the students? Have the students' strengths and interests been used when developing student programming? So these are some initial questions that we're asking before we start even looking at doing modifications. We have a section there, and I want to preface that we've worked on this across all departments within our board. So we've had input from the Equity Department, Indigenous Rights and Education, school programs. We look at pieces like family engagement. What information sharing has taken place between the school, caregivers, and students? Have caregivers been initiated or invited into the initial conversations to discuss strategies and supports? So we've come up here with a sort of a chart and a guide in terms of questions when we're noticing that a student is starting to struggle or showing signs that they're, say, struggling in an area of language, math, or whatever it may be. What are some questions that we're asking ourselves, and how are we currently responding to student needs? Then we go into where we're considering modifications. So we've gone through the initial chart, responded to student needs, and we still feel we're at a place where, how can we best support this student? Again, we have more questions here to engage in the conversation at the school level. They start to become more sort of intensive, layered on questions in terms of like timelines, steps, types of assessment we have used. It really starts getting more sort of specific and looking at what strategies, implementations, accommodations, various things we have done. And then we're getting to a final part here where if we're going to implement modifications, before we go down that route of implementing modifications, again, there's a lot of thought-provoking questions here for the staff to ask themselves, not only looking at the whole person, but also the family engagement, achievement data, and are we following the board's problem-solving pathway? And what pieces have we engaged in this? So this is a document that will be shared out with you. We ask that you please have a look at this doc, and we're open to any feedback. We'll get some feedback back from you. And this is something that as we continue to roll this out as a team, we're going to, continue to share it. Just to give you just really quickly, I'll show you next steps. Sorry, give me 1 second here. Just what's sort of happening in the next couple of months. So we are introducing a modification chart and fact sheet that was already shared with administrators this week, including a presentation where we went over some data with some staff. We've shared it with you tonight to look at that. We are going to have some spring learning where their focus is really going to be on IEP writing and modifications. And we're going to continue to offer workshops and feedback for our staff, administrators, CERTs, and classroom teachers into the spring, but well into the fall too. So we can have, our ultimate goal here is to have a consistent use of modifications across the system. So once again, I know it's sort of introductory. It was a lot of information. I appreciate it. I hope you could follow along. Hope I wasn't using too much teacher talk there. But again, it really is just sort of introductory and informational now. But we're hoping at some future SEAC meetings and some board level meetings, we're able to share some more of this work once we really kind of finalize some of the direction and pieces that we're going. And I'm happy to take any more questions if there's any more questions.
Thanks so much, Conan. I'll give people a few minutes to decide if they have a question and get their hands raised. I just wanted to clarify process for the committee because I think everyone heard that you're looking for some consultation, which this committee exists to provide. So there will be an email coming out after this meeting and a way for committee members to provide some feedback digitally. Okay. And will you also be looking to have a conversation at the next meeting, do you think? Or is this sort of a feedback form and then, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we'd love to have feedback and then have continued conversation at the next meeting for sure.
Okay, fantastic.
If possible, thank you for considering.
So everyone look out for an email that will likely come, I would say from Laura, most likely after this meeting, and that opportunity to provide some feedback. And are there any other questions for Conan? That was a great presentation. Thank you so much for going through that and providing that clarification. As a non-teacher myself, I had some of the same questions, so I appreciate those who raised them. As a parent, we look at report cards, but don't always intuitively understand what the levels are in the various contexts. So that really helps a lot.
Thank you very much. I do actually have to leave for for another engagement, so I'll log off now. But thank you very much, and anyone's welcome to email me directly if you have any more questions in the meantime before we meet again. Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks so much. Be safe out there. Okay.
So next on our agenda today is a presentation from our amazing CPP staff. So we're looking at the CPP Visible Values program, which we've heard about from a couple of other school sites. And this evening, we're fortunate to be joined by the Georgetown District High School team. And again, I'll just ask Colette if you'd like to introduce the team and get us rolling. Thank you.
Yes, I'd love to introduce Nicole Jarvis, the Vice Principal at Georgetown, and Christine Irwin, who is the CCA at Georgetown in the CPP program. And I know Angela and Ryan have been partnering in this work. I don't know, Angela, if you want to add anything to that, or we can turn it over to Nicole and Christine.
Yeah, I think we can turn it right over to them. We're excited to see the presentation this evening. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thanks everyone for the warm welcome. I'm just going to get my screen set up here. Okay. All right, so good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Christine Irwin. I'm the department head of our Community Pathways program at Georgetown District High School. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak today about the important work that we've been doing and engaged with at GDHS with our visible values. I personally have worked in our CPP program for 6 years. This is my 3rd year in the role as the department head. And what I can say is that working in CPP for these last 6 years has been the most rewarding of my career thus far. As mentioned, I know there's been a couple of other presentations already on visible values, so I won't spend too much time here, but I just wanted to share a little bit first about the Visible Values Initiative. So this is a 2-year initiative really focusing on our why, which is seen up here on the screen. What this statement is essentially outlining is the goals and the focus of our Community Pathways program, and specifically in a way that is relevant and visible. What this statement is essentially saying is that we believe when we work together, we can help students grow and get ready to live more independently by the time they graduate from our program at age 21. In all of our programs, you'll see our why in the way we build these caring relationships, include our students in meaningful activities, and teach those important life skills through all of those real-world experiences. Essentially, what we've done is the group of 7 CCAs and admin partners of all of our CPP sites work together to outline all of the things that are currently visible in our CPP programs and that exists within those 4 categories that we see on the screen here in the blue. So that's our relationships, our integration, our student skills and growth, and experiential learning. Essentially, what we were challenged to do and what we were challenged to think about is what would it look like if a visitor came through our schools and visited our CPP classes in our programs? What would the visitors believe about our school's core values of all of our students' potential? The idea is that these 4 visible values, those categorized in blue, are held up on the foundation of both good communication and deliberate staffing. Within each of those 4 categories, we then examined how these values show up across key interactions. So what we started to look at and examine was our student to educator, educator to student relationships, our educator to educator, student to student, and then CPP to the school and the community and vice versa. All of this work stemmed from this guiding question. So how is what we believe about our students' potential, regardless of perceived challenges or differences, visible within our CPP classrooms? What I have here on the screen is just an example of some of the ways in which us as the department heads and admin partners collaboratively came up with all of the ways relationships in particular is visible across all of the 7 CPP sites. The purpose of me showing you this table here is highlighting that we can definitely see that some categories are better established than others, where some definitely are highlighting that there's work that needs to be done. So this leads into our specific steps in our specific direction at Georgetown District High School. So as mentioned, each site was asked to pick a value that they thought they could develop, improve on, and set a goal that would take us through the next couple of years. At Georgetown District, we made this very much a collaborative effort, working on it together with our teaching staff, our EA groups during any PD days or staff meetings. Essentially, what we had asked to do, and what you're seeing here on the screen, is we asked the staff to use sticky notes to brainstorm how those 4 visible values show up in our classrooms. The work that we did, essentially, the value that emerged as the greatest area of need within our specific program was relationships, and that became the focus of our next steps. Here is just showing you how we went about collecting all of that data and the activities that we did collaboratively. Once we collected all of our sticky notes, then what we did is we categorized all of that data and organized it into a digital format to ensure it was more accessible for all. As I mentioned, we knew that our focus was going to be on relationships. However, at this point, our next step was to really identify specifically where and how we could do better. So based on all of the data that we collected, the needs of the student-educator relationships that exist within our program. Now onto the bigger question of the how. So here's where we lead to our plan of action. So what we'd established as being our focus is we wanted to focus on student-educator relationships, specifically through the lens of how our instructional practices lead to an increased independence in our students. What we figured is focusing on these specific relationships through our instructional practice led to this environment that was supportive, where learning was personalized, trust was being built with our students, and we were intentionally guiding our students toward greater independence. It was this thought and this understanding that the support levels should in fact change over time so that our students in our CPP program are leaving our program more independent than they were when they began with us. So how we went about doing this. What we did is we organized our staff into teams, and this was essentially done based on the classrooms or the students that they support in their day-to-day. We asked them to set relationship-based goals with short-term and long-term plans, and then figure out how we were going to put those plans into action. So here is just a little image that I put together that really represents what our plan of action looked like. Okay, so from here is the template that we provided to our staff teams. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through a specific example of how we utilize this template to specifically support a student in one of our communication classes. Essentially, our communication class is comprised of students where communication and communicating their needs, their wants, is the primary focus of their everyday activities. Okay, so like I said, this is a specific example for a student in our communication stream. And we recognize that these templates and these goals and these planning templates are going to look very different for every student because each plan is unique. And whether that's a student who is in our total care pathway, our communication pathway, or students who are in our community skills co-op or our employability skills stream, all of these will look a little bit different. Essentially, what the goal here in this particular example was we were looking at how can we strengthen this particular student, Maya, how can we strengthen rapport by using her interests to increase her independence in all of her daily routines. The skills that we were targeting was task completion with minimal assistance and using her communication device appropriately. What we're really doing here is thinking about, as the educators supporting that student, is how can we take a step back a little bit from that student? What are the small steps that we can take to really increase their independence? At the end of the day, what we really wanted to remember and focus on is how are we going to best prepare that student for life after high school? Here just outlines the short-term and the long-term goals for Maya. So while the short-term goal gives those clear steps and how she will use her communication device, the long-term goal is really ensuring that she becomes independent and uses these skills in daily routines, both inside and outside of the school. And then, of course, our action plan. How are we going to make all of this happen? So the action plan, again, will be unique to the goals for each of the students that we are identifying. So some of the strategy here, you can see daily check-ins, visual schedules, modeling, positive reinforcement, all great strategies that we use to help force and foster that independence. Lastly, the big question, how are we going to know if what we're doing is working or not? So we want to ensure accountability with our data collection and our tracking. So staff, using their own kind of version of their data collection methods in a way that would work best for them and their team, perhaps what works best for that particular student. So the reason for sharing this particular example is that this was one example that was successful. And how do we know that this was successful is that what we went back and looked at is that the data was indicating that each semester over the last year and a half, the number of the IEP goals that the student was achieving independently increased, which is fantastic. So that means the action plan that we had put in place with those short-term and long-term goals were working. What's important to highlight here is that this plan may or did not work for every particular student. So it's the continual reflection and looking back on how we can improve our plan to foster that independence. As mentioned, this example that I speak to is very specific to the focus of what our work has been for the last year, which was that educator to student, student to educator relationship. However, I would like to spend just a couple of minutes here just to highlight some of the other wonderful relationships that exist within our CPP program with respect to educator, student to student, and CPP to the school and community. So here are some images of our educator to educator learning that goes on day to day. So here you can see that we have, information sharing. We have staff working collaboratively on resources and materials. We're looking at the co-creation of learning goals and expectations for our students. Really looking at focusing on fostering that safe space, that respectful, positive environment. Here are some of our student-to-student interactions. So what these images are highlighting here are some of our students being supported at working in our food school. We have mainstream students from the music program coming in to play music for our kids weekly. Project search connections. You can see here some of our leadership students supporting our swim team with our students at OFSA, which is awesome. And what we're really trying to do and focus on is encouraging friendship and peer relationships, not just within the classroom, not just within our program, but across the school community. Lastly, here, some of the examples of CPP and being visible in our school and community. So we have extracurricular activities, OFSA, track, cross-country, swimming, football, field trips, Special Olympics connections. We have artwork displayed in the hallways of that was created by our students. We have students here participating in the talent shows or attending prom. And lastly, we have our students who are doing co-op out in the community, Moldmaster Sportsplex, North Halton Golf Course, Mount View Residency, just to name a few of the places where we are currently having our co-ops. So kind of some of the key takeaways of all of this work really comes down to two things. One, collaboration. So this collaboration and this deliberate focus on relationships, educator to student, and relationships in general has really fostered this common focus and this shared ownership of the work that we do with our students. What we can celebrate and what we can see happening is we can see growth, we can see change, this increased sense of belonging within our students as their independence increases, willing to take on more risks, those types of things. What we know is that our progress is slow, but as a team at Georgetown, we remain committed to continuously improving and changing as needed to continue to meet the needs of all the students who join us in our program. Just want to finish here with some kind of next steps. As I had mentioned, our focus thus far has really been on that educator and student relationship. So moving forward, what we want to do is we want to look at expanding to examine our other relationships. Here is just a list of some of the things that we've already put into place this year, and I'm hopeful that this list will continue to grow as we continue to improve. Just as an example, we have more students out in co-op placements this year than ever before out in the community. For the first time ever, we have a CPP student council representative. We are working on increasing our communication with parents, both through a monthly newsletter that goes home, as well as working on our presence on our school website. We've just started for semester 2 this Building Connections program, where we've partnered with the leadership class from the mainstream, and those students come and support our students period 3 during our lunch hour to really connect, have our kids socialize, really focusing on having our kids, kind of getting off their technology and engaging in those meaningful relationships. Last couple of things I'll mention here. We're looking at, how can we better help support transitions after high school, whether that's looking at our employment or community living supports, and continuing to work and improve on our informal parent information nights. And lastly, but certainly not least, we know that our work is never finished. But as a team, our team at Georgetown is incredible, and our commitment to our students and their progress remains so strong. And so to conclude, thank you so much for the opportunity to present all of the work that we've been doing and continuing to do with our visible values work at Georgetown. That's all for me, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Christine. That was fantastic. We really appreciate the small window into the great program that you have at Georgetown and the work that your team is doing. It's a privilege to have you here with us this evening.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Katie.
I love this. Thank you. I love the presentation. I don't get a view to the secondary CPP programs because my little guy is still in elementary, but I love this. I had a lot of questions that came up actually. So first of all, it looks like you're making a lot of progress. You said it's slow. I think you're underselling it. It looks great. Congrats. I'm curious about a couple things here. It seems like you've instituted some best practices in terms of stuff that works for your CPP programs. How do you share that across the board, like within different schools within Halton?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for that. That's nice. So as a CCA team, there's 7 sites. We meet monthly at various locations just to kind of check in, touch base, share best practices, share successes, struggles, all of those things. So we're all collaborating hopefully once a month. And that's often spearheaded by Ryan. I know Ryan's here. So that's how we kind of share all of these ideas across departments.
And so does each school, do they try and institute things that have worked for, like, say in Georgetown, in Oakville or Burlington or where have you?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're always learning from each other and continuing to collaborate. And I know definitely there's been some strategies that I've heard other CCAs talk about that I bring back to our school to see how that could work and stuff. So it definitely is a collaborative process between all of our CPP sites.
Awesome. I have another question, and other people don't have any questions. Sorry. For the Building Connections program, I thought that was really exciting. I have a son who uses a device to communicate. And one of the things that I find is a barrier that comes up pretty young, and it's with adults as well. I see it with kids, but they're a little bit more open to it, is kind of like, how do you teach someone who's in mainstream or someone who's, like, let's say neurotypical, how do you teach them to interact with someone a device to speak? And I think that's an opportunity, certainly in elementary. But when you talk about these Building Connections programs, like I'm assuming these kids volunteer and they come in and interact with these kids, and they're choosing to do this. But is there a general kind of like sense of strategy? Like, how do you start this, like, from a young age to then move it up to secondary where we can continue this? Because I see even adults, like when a child or a student has a device, they don't really know, they're kind of like thrown off. They don't know how, like, you need to give them time and space in order to communicate. Like, do you guys have a strategy that you use in that program, or these just like special kids who kind of know to do that. Like, I'm just curious about it when I think of like whole kind of like this whole I don't know, like process. Like it kind of needs to start young, and obviously, you know, these are secondary kids, so they can appreciate that. So I think you get my question. It was not it was not succinct.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying, or you're asking here. And I think the biggest thing is that what we try to focus on is, you know, we don't want, although we're part of the whole school, we try to not operate as our own kind of silo. And we find that the more exposure and the more engagement we have with our students out in the mainstream community, I guess the more, you know, the more willing that mainstream students are to come and engage and interact, because, you know, I think for some of these mainstream students at times, it can be a little bit intimidating, and when they're not sure how to best support these students. So Angela, Ryan, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there, but I think it's just, you know, that the continual, you know, really promoting that engagement and that integration of our kids as a whole school rather than just our own kind of silo.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money, Christine. When we look at our students who are neurodiverse and who have a variety of ways of communicating, ways of being in the world, we're aiming for all of our schools to be inclusive environments where, you know, folks are honored and respected and engaged with in their own unique ways. So, you know, Christine, you creating those unique opportunities to invite people into your classrooms, to model, to coach, and to teach. I think that's something that we would find most schools are working towards.
Can I add to that? I'm jumping in there. We have a big school. We're at, not as the biggest in the board, but we have over 1,500 students. And the students from our CPP program are often in and around the rest of the building. And I am always so impressed at how the interactions with mainstream and our students in CPP, how it goes. The students, while they may not know exactly how to interact with our students in CPP, they figure it out, and they are kind and gracious and patient. As you know, if we have a student in crisis, they need to, you know, navigate that. The mainstream students do it beautifully. If they're students walking down the hall and they're trying to communicate something, they're hearing them, they're listening, they're engaging as they go by. So it really is wonderful. There's always learning, and there's always opportunities to do better. But it is nice to see it. It makes me smile when I see all those interactions happening.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for those questions, Katie. That was awesome. And to the staff team, thank you for sharing that perspective. I think, you know, one of the things that we sometimes don't talk about is the learning that students have is just part of being a community. And the school communities are just small versions of our larger communities. So that learning benefits everybody as our kids go out into the world and you know, be good, strong members of the community. So thank you so much for the work that you do. I'm just looking, oh, there we go. Colette, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo my appreciation to Christine and Nicole. Georgetown's a very busy place. You've got a large program, but hearing you speak about very intentional goals and designing a plan to achieve those goals and engaging all of the staff and tailoring it to the kids, really impressive, really outstanding. And seeing the pictures really tells the story of what you're doing for students and how you're serving families. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will now move on to the next part of our agenda, which is communications to SEAC. And as always, we'll start with the superintendent's report. So I'll pass it over to you, Colette.
Yeah, just a couple of things tonight. It's hard to believe, but this time of year we start planning for next year. So we are heading into what we call staffing season. We are looking at both in elementary and in secondary, the number of students we have in our schools as a whole population, as well as the number of students that are coming, going, staying in our self-contained programs, and then ensuring that we are allocating the staffing to schools. Whether it's in elementary, we assign full-time equivalent staffing, or in secondary, we give what's called sections, which is basically a portion of a teacher for every period. And that's really a composite of overall population as well as specific student need. So this process really begins now and takes us through March and April and throughout the spring, where we're developing teacher assignments, draft timetables. And through this process, we have talked about it a few times, but we are exploring some increases to some of our self-contained classes. We're going to be diving a little bit more deeply into that this month and into the beginning of March. So I will likely have more information, more specifics to share coming back to SEAC March, if not March, then April. But that is something that we are looking at and mocking up as part of the budget efficiency process. And then the other piece was just around our sports festival days. Just a reminder that we have 2 days coming up in March, March 25th and 26th. And the invitation is extended to all of you. If anyone wants to come by, just let Laura know and we'll make the appropriate arrangements at the Velodrome. But it's a great thing to see and be a part of, even if it's just for an hour or half an hour. But you're more than welcome to join us. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you so much, Colette. Are there any questions or comments following on Colette's report? I don't see any hands up. Okay, so we'll move on to our association reports. Does anyone have anything from our association members to share this evening? Okay, I don't think. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Yana.
Hi, sorry, guys. I was just figuring out the buttons. I did want to just bring everyone's attention to a standing together a neurodiversity symposium that the Center for Diverse Learners is putting on for the whole month of March. And it is basically a month-long national learning series that's really intended for parents, caregivers, educators, or professionals working in this space to explore how we can learn, grow, and support our neurodiverse individuals. And I'll send the flyer over to the group, but basically you can get more information by going to our website, which will be listed in the handout that I provide. And basically the kinds of things that people who attend can gain are things like practical strategies to use at home and school, tools and resources to support, things like executive functioning, learning, and social emotional growth. So it looks like a really nice venue. I will send that over to the group, and I encourage you to visit our website and find out more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thanks. Anyone else with anything to report this evening from our associations? I don't see any hands up, but of course, jump in anytime if anyone thinks of anything. I'll just move along to the trustees' report. Audrey and I don't have anything specific to report on this evening, but I just wanted to take this opportunity, since I have the mic, to address a housekeeping item that I neglected at our last meeting. We are at the annual anniversary of the establishment of this term's SEAC, and so it is the time, according to our governance procedure, for the board to elect our chair and vice chair for this committee. Ideally, these roles are held by non-trustee members of the committee, and Katie's been a fantastic vice chair for the last year. This time last year, we were not able to identify a member who was able to take on the role of chair, so I put up my hand, and here I am. It would, as I said, be preferable for a non-trustee member to take it on, so I just wanted to offer some information this evening that I'm not sure if we've shared in the past or wasn't totally clear. In the hopes that maybe another committee member would be open to considering these roles. So as you know, our meetings are held in hybrid format with the electronic or in-person attendance as possibilities to ensure accessibility. And it works really great, especially an evening like this when it's not so nice outside for driving. But it's not actually necessary for the chair to be in person at the board office if another committee member can be present. So there are rules and regulations around how we have to conduct our meetings, which is great. And one of them is that somebody has to be in person at the board office, which we've always been able to do. So I just wanted to share that I can commit to continue to attend in person to ensure that we're in compliance with the regulations if the chair for the coming year finds that they're unable to do so. And you know, Audrey and I can sort of work together to make sure that that coverage is maintained so we stay within the regulations. So given that, I'd like to ask all committee members to consider these roles, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions or concerns. I can tell you, you know, it's not, I'm sure I make it look super complicated, but it's really not. It's a great honor to serve as the chair for this committee. And obviously, you know that we have a great group of people here. So we will elect the chair and vice chair at our next meeting, which will be our March meeting. And so please, as I said, please feel free to start the conversation in the next month or so, and then we'll be ready at our next meeting to do the chair and vice chair elections. So thank you so much for that little aside. We'll move on now back to our agenda. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sapna.
Hi, Carol. Sorry, I just wanted to quickly understand, and maybe everybody knows and I don't, but are there any qualifications or requirements required or requirements attached to, you know, standing up for a chair or a co-chair position?
No, I wouldn't say anything specific. I mean, the willingness to lead the meetings, as you know, you've seen, there's nothing really too secretive behind the scenes. The chair and vice chair meet with staff. So Colette, Superintendent Reddick, before each meeting to discuss the agenda, to incorporate any topics that have come forward from the committee, and to decide which presentations and consultations will happen in each meeting. So there is that. It's a quick online meeting usually to have those discussions, to set the agenda. And then of course there's leading the meeting, as we are this evening. And if the committee decides that any communication, whether it be to the minister or with other school boards, is desired, then to facilitate that communication. But that's pretty much it. There is a script, so you know, I would obviously share that. And yeah, our SEAC has been really well established at the Halton District School Board, and there's a great history of fantastic chairs that I was able to step into the shoes of. And I would say that it's a rewarding role to take on, but not super complicated. So please don't feel intimidated. Happy, like I said, to have a discussion if anybody's considering it, and we will. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, there you go. I saw you just popped up. Yes. Okay, so if there's no other questions on that, we're going to move into our committee reports. So we have a couple of standing committees that SEAC representatives are sitting on. So the first one is the Accessibility and Coordinating Committee, which is you, Katie. Has the committee met since our last meeting? No. Okay. Okay, and then do we have Tara with us tonight? Don't think she was able to join.
No.
Okay, so Tara was sitting on the calendar committee, and we had an update last meeting, and we've since then, the Board of Trustees has approved the final calendar, and it now goes to the Ministry of Education for final approval. But the calendar for next school year has been set. It's kind of funny to think that all this work is done now for September, which seems far away. So the next item on our agenda is the order paper or ideas for the next agenda. So if anyone has any requests or ideas for topics to be covered at a future meeting, go ahead and raise your hand now and share those. Or as always, please reach out through Laura to make those suggestions. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Oh, yes, go ahead, Sapna.
Hi, sorry, I have loved the agenda that we covered for today, and would love to, extend it beyond IEP. The other aspect of that is the contained program. So it would be great if we can have a similar discussion next time, focused on contained program, how that's helping the students, and just to understand how the curriculum is being set, and how we are setting up our students in their learning journey.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes, go ahead, Colin.
Thanks for that, Sapna. Are you looking, or do you have an interest in any one particular self-contained program, or would you like to get a sense of the range of offerings that we have? Because we have a number of different ones to support different profiles of learners.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see how, even if it's like the way we did for IEP today, just to understand we focused on modifications, but if we can focus on just the range of contained programs that are being offered and how they are being set up to support the students, it would be a great starting point.
Great. Yeah, we can do that.
Can I just second that? Some of my favorite presentations over the years have been when we either have like accessibility in or like CPP, like programs that are existing within the board right now, and we get to highlight them. Because like as you as educators, you probably get to go into the school and see them, but as like other members of SEAC who don't work for the board, it's just so great to see it, like real examples of the great work that we're doing in Halton. So I love them. So any presentation like that, I think we always have high engagement, and it's so great to see all these acronyms and stuff that sit in the board like actually at play.
And so if I could just build on that, Katie, I think this year, with the CPP visible value presentations, as you say, kind of really been a really personalized view into specific sites. So I'm wondering, and I can take it back to the team if this is what you're thinking, is if we can have some teachers from programs present their kind of lived experience teaching in those programs and what it looks like, and their impact, and yes, I'm seeing some heads and nod. Okay, great. We can do both. We can do a little bit of an overview, because I think we'll have to give some runway for teachers to kind of plan that, but we can certainly build that in over time. That we're bringing some of our educators from the self-contained programs to present to you, but perhaps next month, starting with just an overview of our offerings, so you can kind of see the kind of the range of programs and which programs support which learners. Okay.
It sounds fantastic. It's always great to get a window into what's happening in the schools, and staff are obviously the best representatives of the work that they're doing. So these presentations are fantastic. Thank you so much. And on behalf of the committee, Colette, please thank staff for taking the time to do these presentations for us. I know it's always at the end of a long work day, and we're very appreciative of that. So I don't see any other hands up. So the only thing left, on our agenda is to adjourn the meeting. We have exhausted our agenda, so I'll call this meeting adjourned and look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting, which is March 25th at the usual time of 7 p.m. And just a reminder, there will be some communication coming out, as Conan had described, and a call out for some input from the committee. So please keep an eye out for that. And thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.